If anyone had told me 6 months ago that the man who once threw a stapler across the newsroom because I misspelled governor would end up writing a love song about me, I would have laughed so hard I'd choke on my coffee. But here I am, sitting in the middle of New York City traffic, earbuds in, listening to his rough demo, and realizing my whole life has been rewritten without my permission. The song isn't even polished, just a raw voice recording with a few guitar chords, but I can hear him in it. His voice, his truth. And God help me, it sounds like he's bleeding my name into every line. I wasn't looking for this. I didn't ask for it. In fact, for the longest time, I thought Daniel Moore hated me. The first day I walked into the newsroom of the Daily Ledger, fresh out of grad school, clutching my degree like it was a shield against rejection, Daniel didn't even glance up from his desk. He just muttered, "Another intern?" As though the universe had personally offended him. I wasn't an intern. I was hired as a junior reporter, but I didn't dare correct him that day. I should have known then that Daniel wasn't like everyone else. He was sharp, cutting, and at times unbearably cold. But behind those eyes, dark, watchful, and constantly scanning like he was still on deadline, there was something I couldn't look away from. What I didn't realize was that the closer I got to him, the more dangerous it became for both of us. The newsroom at the Ledger was chaos personified. Phones ringing, editors barking, reporters typing like their keyboards were on fire. I loved it. I loved the smell of ink and coffee, the adrenaline of deadlines, the pulse of New York running through the wires of every breaking story. Daniel thrived in it too, though he wore it differently. Where I saw excitement, he saw a battlefield. He was the kind of journalist who lived on caffeine and instinct, who never let his guard down, not even when he smiled, which was rare enough to be a front-page event. We were colleagues. Nothing more, nothing less. At least, that's what I told myself whenever I caught my gaze lingering too long on the curve of his jaw, or the way his shirt clung to his shoulders after a long day. And then came the year-end party. It was December in New York, which meant the city was strung with lights and frost, the air sharp with the promise of snow. The Ledger rented out a loft downtown, cheap wine, loud music, reporters who didn't know how to dance but tried anyway. I hadn't planned on drinking much, but nerves and the sight of Daniel leaning against the bar, sleeves rolled up, tie undone, sipping bourbon like a scene from a movie, pushed me toward the punch bowl more often than I should admit. By midnight, I was tipsy. By 1, the party had thinned out, leaving only a few of us stragglers. Daniel was still there, alone, watching the city lights through the tall windows like he was waiting for something or someone. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the alcohol, maybe it was the music, maybe it was just months of unsaid things pressing against my chest. But I walked up to him and said, "You know, for a guy who acts like he hates people, you sure look lonely standing here." He turned, slow, eyes narrowing like he was dissecting every word. "And what makes you think I hate people?" I grinned, reckless. "Because you barely tolerate me, and I'm delightful." For a second, I thought he'd snap back with one of his sharp remarks. Instead, something shifted. His lips curved, not quite a smile, more like the ghost of one. "Delightful, huh?" And then he did something I'll never forget. He leaned closer. Not enough to be obvious, but enough that I could smell the bourbon on his breath, feel the warmth of his shoulder near mine. "Maybe you're not as unbearable as I thought," he said quietly. It was nothing, a line, a moment, but to me it felt like the ground had tilted. What followed wasn't a whirlwind romance. It wasn't fireworks or dramatic confessions. It was smaller than that, quieter, which in its own way was far more dangerous. The next day at work, he was back to being Daniel, distant, critical, stubborn. But every so often, I'd catch him looking at me when he thought I wasn't watching. And God, when his eyes met mine, it felt like I was standing too close to the sun. We didn't talk about it. We didn't have to. The tension built on its own, unspoken, undeniable. Until one night it all came undone. The city was asleep under a blanket of snow, the newsroom nearly empty. We were the only two left, working late on a breaking story. I was frustrated, stuck on a paragraph that wouldn't come together, and Daniel, of course, had to hover over my shoulder, critiquing every word. Your lead is weak, he muttered. You're burying the hook. I spun in my chair, glare sharp. Do you ever say anything encouraging? He didn't flinch. When you earn it. God, you're insufferable. Better insufferable than mediocre. That did it. I stood, ready to storm out, when he caught my wrist. Not hard, just enough to stop me. Wait, he said. It was the first time his voice broke not with anger, but with something raw, almost fragile. I froze, staring at him. His hand lingered warm against my skin. I don't. He started, then stopped, jaw tight. I don't want to fight with you. And just like that, the air changed. The newsroom, the snow, the world, all of it fell away until there was only him, standing too close, looking at me like he'd been holding back for years. I don't remember who moved first. Maybe it was me, maybe it was him. But suddenly, we were kissing desperate, reckless, like we'd both been starving and only just found food. When we broke apart, breathless, he whispered, "This is a mistake." But he kissed me again anyway. I should have known then that nothing between us would ever be simple. Daniel wasn't the kind of man who let his heart lead. He was guarded, wounded in ways he refused to admit, haunted by mistakes I hadn't yet learned about. Loving him was like loving a storm. You couldn't control it, only survive it. And yet, I couldn't stop myself. Over the next weeks, what began as stolen moments in dark hallways became something deeper. Coffee breaks that lingered, texts at midnight, his hand brushing mine under the desk, like a secret only we knew. It was terrifying, exhilarating, addictive, but love, especially ours, never comes without a price. The first time I realized I was in too deep was when Daniel didn't show up to work. He never missed a day, not for snowstorms, not for the flu, not even when he once fractured his wrist chasing down a crooked councilman. Daniel Moore was the definition of relentless. But that Tuesday morning, his desk was empty. His chair was turned slightly, as though he'd left mid-sentence. I tried to ignore it, told myself it wasn't my business. But the truth was gnawing at me. I cared. Too much. More than I should. By noon, I cracked. I texted him. You alive? Or just avoiding me? An hour later, nothing. 2 hours. My chest felt tight. It wasn't until nearly 5 that my phone buzzed. Alive. Don't wait up. That was all. No explanation. No warmth. Just Daniel being Daniel, pushing me away with a single clipped sentence. But that night, when I left the newsroom, I didn't go home. My feet carried me through the frozen streets to his apartment building, a worn brick walk-up in the East Village. I stood outside, breath fogging the air, heart pounding like a drum I couldn't silence. When he finally opened the door, his eyes widened like he'd seen a ghost. "What the hell are you doing here?" he demanded, voice rough. I swallowed. "Checking if you're okay. I told you I was alive. Being alive isn't the same as being okay." He stared at me for a long moment, the silence stretching. Then he sighed, stepping aside. "Fine. Come in before you freeze to death." His apartment was smaller than I expected, cluttered with books and records stacked in uneven towers. A guitar leaned against the wall, surprising me. I'd never once heard him talk about music. Daniel dropped onto his couch, rubbing his temples. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, tension pulling at every line of his body. "You should go," he muttered. I sat down beside him instead. "What's going on?" "Nothing." "Daniel." Something in my tone must have broken through, because his shoulders slumped. He didn't look at me when he said, quietly, "My brother called." I blinked. I didn't even know he had a brother. He needs money. Again. And Daniel trailed off, voice sharp with frustration. "I can't keep bailing him out, but if I don't, who else will? He's my brother." I didn't know what to say. I wasn't used to him opening up, even a little. Carefully, I put a hand on his arm. "You don't have to carry it alone." He laughed, bitter and broken. "You don't get it. That's all I've ever done. Carry other people's messes. If I stop, everything falls apart." I wanted to tell him he didn't have to be alone anymore, that I wanted to help, even if he thought I couldn't. But the words stuck in my throat. So instead, I just sat there, silent, letting the warmth of my hand speak for me. For the first time, Daniel didn't pull away. The weeks that followed were both heaven and hell. Heaven, because every stolen moment with him felt electric coffee runs that turned into lingering stares, late-night edits that dissolved into whispered laughter, kisses pressed into the shadows of the copy room. Hell, because he refused to name it. Whatever we had, Daniel wouldn't let it exist in daylight. "We can't," he whispered one night after kissing me breathless against the wall of his apartment. "Can't what?" I whispered back, though my hands were still tangled in his shirt. "This, us." My heart sank, but my lips betrayed me. "Then why do you keep kissing me?" He didn't answer. He just kissed me again, harder, like he could erase the question. It wasn't just fear holding him back. It was history. Little by little, I pieced it together. A childhood in a small conservative town. A father who left. A mother who prayed the wrong out of him. A first love that ended with betrayal and bruises he never explained. No wonder he built walls around himself. No wonder he clung to control like it was the only thing keeping him upright. But loving Daniel was like trying to pry open a locked door. Some days I glimpsed the light inside, his rare smile, the way his laugh filled a room when he let it. But most days, I was left standing outside in the cold. And still, I couldn't walk away. The breaking point came in February. We were covering a mayoral scandal, the newsroom buzzing with tension. Deadlines stacked, tempers flared, and Daniel predictably took control. He edited everyone's copy, barked orders, pushed us all harder than usual. At one point, I slammed my notebook shut and snapped, "You know, just because you're miserable doesn't mean the rest of us have to be." The entire room froze. Daniel's eyes cut to mine, sharp as knives. "Office," he said, voice low. I followed him, pulse racing. The moment the door shut, he exploded. "What the hell was that? What the hell is this?" I shot back. "You kiss me, you touch me, you make me feel like I matter, and then you shut me out like I'm nothing." His jaw tightened. "We can't do this here." "No, Daniel. You can't keep hiding. Not from them, not from me, not from yourself." He stepped closer, anger radiating off him. "You think this is easy? You think I don't want to?" He cut himself off, fists clenched. "Then say it," I begged. "Say you want me, or let me go." The silence that followed was suffocating. His chest rose and fell, eyes burning with something I couldn't read. For a moment, I thought he'd finally break, finally let the truth spill out. Instead, he whispered, "I can't." And just like that, he walked out. The days after were unbearable. He avoided me at work, his coldness sharper than ever. I threw myself into assignments, stayed late just to avoid the ache of going home alone. I told myself I hated him, that I was done. But hate is just love that's been starved too long. Then came the night everything changed. It was snowing again, thick flakes drifting through the city. I was walking home, collar pulled up against the wind, when I heard someone call my name. I turned. Daniel stood across the street, soaked from head to toe. No coat, no umbrella, just raw desperation in his eyes. My heart stuttered. "What are you doing?" I shouted over the storm. He crossed the street, nearly slipping on the ice, and before I could react, his hands were on my shoulders, his face inches from mine. "I can't keep running," he said, voice breaking. "Not from you. Not from this." I stared, stunned, breath clouding between us. "Daniel," he kissed me. Right there, in the middle of a snow-covered street, cars honking, strangers staring. It wasn't a cautious kiss or a stolen one. It was open, messy, desperate confession made flesh. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet, whether from snow or tears I couldn't tell. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered, "but I want to try. With you." And just like that, every wall I'd been pushing against finally cracked. That was when the music started. I didn't know Daniel played guitar. I didn't know he wrote songs either. But one night, curled up on his couch, he picked up the instrument like it was a part of him. "It's nothing," he muttered when I asked. just noise. But when his fingers touched the strings, it wasn't noise. It was him. All the things he couldn't say out loud, spilling into the room in chords and melodies. The first time he sang, his voice was rough, unpolished, but real. The lyrics were half-finished, lines scratched out and rewritten, but I caught phrases that sounded too much like me to be coincidence. "You're writing about me?" I whispered, half laughing, half terrified. He looked at me, eyes soft in a way I'd never seen. Maybe I am. Loving Daniel was still hard. He still pushed back, still wrestled with ghosts I couldn't always fight. But for the first time, he let me in, not just to his bed, but to his heart, his music, his pain. And slowly, I realized something. He wasn't writing songs about me. He was writing songs for me. Songs to say what he couldn't in daylight. Songs to keep me close, even when fear told him to push me away. Songs that turned two colleagues in a newsroom into something we never thought possible. For a while, it felt like we had found something fragile but real, a rhythm only we could hear. He wrote songs in the quiet of his apartment. I wrote stories in the chaos of the newsroom. And between us, there was this constant thread, half music, half silence, that tied me to him in ways I couldn't explain to anyone else. But love has a way of demanding more. It doesn't stay hidden. It wants the world to know. The first crack came during a staff meeting. We were presenting our pitches for a new investigative series. I'd been working on a piece about systemic racism in housing, something close to my heart, something I poured myself into. I finished my pitch, expecting the usual critiques, when the editor-in-chief nodded approvingly. "Good work, Evan. You've come a long way since you started." The words warmed me more than they should have until I caught Daniel's eyes. He wasn't smiling. In fact, he looked like he wanted to burn the compliment out of the air. Later, when I asked him about it, he shrugged. "Don't let it go to your head." I laughed, trying to brush it off, but there was an edge in his tone that cut too deep. And it wasn't the first time. More and more, Daniel grew restless when other people praised me. He snapped quicker, pulled away faster. And every time, I wondered if what we had was real, or if it was just another storm I'd get caught in. The night it all came to a head, he showed up at my apartment unannounced. I opened the door to find him standing there, soaked from rain, eyes dark with something I couldn't place. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside, heart thudding. Of course. He paced the length of my living room like a caged animal, hands running through his damp hair. Finally, he turned to me. "Do you ever wonder what happens when people find out?" "Find out what?" I asked, though I already knew. "About us." His voice cracked on the word. I swallowed. "Daniel, nobody needs to know unless we want them to." "But we work together," he snapped. "The newsroom is a shark tank. If they smell blood, they'll tear us apart. And God knows what the editors would say. We could lose everything." I stepped closer, trying to calm him. "Or we could stop being afraid. Maybe it's not as bad as you think." He laughed bitterly. "You really believe that? This isn't some love song, Evan. This is real life." The words stung more than I wanted to admit. I wanted to scream that it already was a love song, that every stolen moment, every kiss, every lyric he scribbled in his notebook proved it. But before I could, he collapsed onto the couch, head in his hands. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered. I sat beside him, touching his shoulder. "You don't have to know. You just have to want it." For a long time, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he leaned into me. "God help me," he murmured. "I do." The days blurred into weeks, and slowly, I started to believe we'd survive it. We had our rituals. Saturday mornings with bad diner coffee. Sunday nights where he played his unfinished songs, and I teased him about rhyming love with above. Midweek dinners at my place, where he'd chop vegetables like he was chasing a deadline, pretending he didn't care but secretly enjoying it when I laughed. It wasn't perfect. We still fought. He still closed off when things got too heavy. But we were building something, brick by fragile brick. Until the night the newsroom found out. It started as gossip. A stray comment, a too long glance across the newsroom, whispers that buzzed louder every day. I tried to ignore it, but one evening, as I was packing up, a coworker smirked. "So, Evan, you and Moore, what's the deal?" I froze, pulse hammering. "What? Come on. You two practically make out with your eyes every time you're in the same room." The laughter that followed was sharp, cutting. I forced a smile, muttered something non-committal, and left as fast as I could. But the damage was done. The next day, Daniel was ice. He barely looked at me, barely spoke. When I cornered him in the stairwell, demanding to know what was going on, he said, "We can't. Not anymore." My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" "They're talking. The newsroom. The editors. This is exactly what I warned you about." "So you're just going to throw it all away?" My voice cracked, anger mixing with heartbreak. His eyes hardened. "I'm protecting us." "No," I snapped. "You're protecting yourself. You're scared, Daniel, and instead of facing it, you're running." He flinched like I'd struck him, but he didn't argue. He just walked away, leaving me alone in a stairwell that suddenly felt colder than any winter storm. For weeks, we didn't speak outside of work. At the office, he was strictly professional, his tone clipped, his gaze averted. I hated him for it, hated how easily he could shut me out. And yet, every night, I lay awake listening to the songs he'd left behind, wondering if he still wrote about me or if the music had stopped. One evening, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I went to the bar we sometimes snuck off to after deadlines, half hoping he'd be there. He wasn't, but someone else was. His brother. I only knew because Daniel had shown me a photo once, an old snapshot from when they were kids. Now, the man looked older, worn down, but unmistakable. He was slumped at the bar, nursing a whiskey like it was medicine. "You're Evan, right?" he asked when I sat near him. I froze. "Yeah." He laughed bitterly. "Figures. Daniel doesn't shut up about you." My chest tightened. He talks about me. All the damn time," his brother muttered. "Sings too. Won't admit it, but those songs? They're all you." I stared, speechless. Then his brother leaned closer, eyes glassy with drink. "Don't give up on him. He doesn't know how to let people love him, but he needs it. He needs you." The words hit harder than anything Daniel had ever said himself. The next day, I found him in the newsroom, hunched over his desk. My pulse raced as I walked up, heart in my throat. "We need to talk," I said. He didn't look up. "I'm busy, Daniel." My voice trembled. "I'm not going anywhere. You can push me away all you want, but I'm still here. Because I love you." The word hung between us like a live wire. His pen stilled. Slowly, he looked up, eyes wide, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen. "Evan." His voice broke. I swallowed. "You don't have to say it back. Just stop pretending this isn't real. Stop pretending you don't feel it too." For a moment, I thought he'd shut down again. But then, quietly, he whispered, "I do. God help me, I do." And in that instant, the walls he'd spent years building finally began to crumble. That night, he didn't take me to his apartment. He took me to a small music venue downtown, nearly empty, the kind of place where dreams were born in front of a crowd of 12. He sat me down at a table, grabbed his guitar, and walked onto the stage. My heart stopped as he adjusted the mic, eyes flicking nervously toward me. "This is new," he said, voice low. "It's for someone who doesn't know how much they mean to me. Or maybe they do now." And then he played. The melody was rough, unpolished, but every note was him. Every lyric was me. The room faded away until it was just his voice, raw and trembling, carrying the truth he couldn't speak in daylight. When the last chord faded, he looked right at me. And for the first time, I knew no matter how messy, how terrifying, how uncertain was mine. The night Daniel sang for me in that dim little venue, something shifted. It wasn't just that he finally stopped hiding, it was that, for the first time, he let the world see what I already knew. He wasn't just a man built out of walls and sharp edges. He was music. He was fire. He was fragile. And he was mine. But the world doesn't pause just because you fall in love. The newsroom didn't suddenly become kinder. Rumors still buzzed, and stares lingered longer than they should. Some of our colleagues whispered when we passed by, and once I overheard someone mutter, "Figures. That's why he's always favored him." Stung, but I held my head high, because the difference now was that Daniel didn't let me carry it alone. One morning, as we prepared to pitch stories, a senior editor made a snide remark. "Maybe you should let your boyfriend handle this one. He seems to be your muse these days." The room went silent. My face burned. I opened my mouth to speak, to defuse it somehow, but Daniel beat me to it. He set down his notes, looked the editor dead in the eye, and said calmly, "If you've got a problem with the quality of our work, say that. Otherwise, keep my personal life out of your mouth." The editor blinked, taken aback. Daniel's voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that silenced the room. He didn't flinch, didn't look away, didn't apologize. And for the first time, I realized he wasn't just protecting me. He was protecting us. That night, back at his apartment, I couldn't stop smiling. "What?" he asked, frowning as he strummed lazily on his guitar. "You," I said, "standing up for us like that. You don't know how much that meant to me." He looked embarrassed, muttering, "It was nothing." "No," I said firmly. "It was everything." He glanced up then, eyes softening. "I'm still scared, you know?" "I know." I reached over, threading my fingers through his. "So am I. But being scared doesn't mean it's not worth it." For a long moment he just held my gaze. Then, quietly, he whispered, "I love you." It was the first time he'd said it out loud. 3 small words, but they cracked me open, filled me, healed parts of me I didn't even know were broken. I kissed him like I'd been waiting my whole life for that moment, because maybe I had. Spring came to the city, and with it, new beginnings. The Ledger launched my investigative series on housing inequality, and Danilov course edited every line, pushing me to be better, sharper, stronger. But now, when he leaned over my shoulder, his hand brushed mine intentionally, not by accident. Now, when he critiqued me, there was warmth behind the sharpness. Pride he didn't bother to hide. At night, I sat in his apartment, listening as he worked on his songs. They were still raw, still imperfect, but they were growing like him, like us. Sometimes he'd play for me. Sometimes he'd shove the guitar away. Embarrassed, but I could always hear what he couldn't say out loud. "You're not just writing songs about me," I teased one evening. "You're writing our story." He chuckled, shaking his head. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just trying to keep up with you." I leaned against him, resting my head on his shoulder. "We're writing it together." Of course, not everything was easy. Love doesn't erase pain. Daniel still battled with old ghosts, his family's rejection, the scars of past heartbreaks, the pressure of a career that demanded everything. Sometimes he'd retreat into himself, shutting me out. Sometimes I'd get frustrated, pushing too hard for him to open up. But slowly we learned. He learned that leaning on me didn't make him weak. I learned that patience wasn't silence, that sometimes love meant waiting, and sometimes it meant pushing, and sometimes it meant simply being there, steady, unshaken. The fights didn't scare me anymore, because every time, without fail, he came back. Every time he chose me. By summer, something incredible happened. A small indie label heard one of his demos. They wanted to record it. It wasn't a record deal, not yet, but it was a chance. A stage. A way for him to share the music he'd hidden for so long. The night he told me, he was pacing, restless, like he couldn't believe it was real. "They want me to play at a showcase," he said, "in front of actual people." I grinned. "Daniel, that's amazing." "It's terrifying," he muttered. "I don't know if I can." I stepped forward, cutting him off with a kiss. "You can, and you will. And I'll be there, cheering louder than anyone." He laughed then, a sound so pure it lit up the whole room. "God, what did I do to deserve you?" I held his face in my hands. "You wrote songs about me. That's a pretty good start." The night of the showcase, I sat in the front row of a crowded bar, nerves buzzing through me like static. Daniel walked onto the stage, guitar in hand, looking like he'd rather face down a corrupt senator than a crowd of music lovers. But then his eyes found mine, and I saw it shift, the steadying, the way his shoulders straightened as if my presence alone was enough to hold him up. "This one," he said into the mic, "is for someone who taught me how to stop running." The first chord rang out, and my throat tightened. It was our song, the one he'd first played for me months ago, rough and unfinished. But now it was whole, complete. And when he sang, the room faded until it was just us again, like it had always been. The applause at the end was thunderous. But the only thing I heard was the quiet promise in his voice when he stepped off stage, pulled me into his arms, and whispered, "We made it. We didn't become perfect. We didn't become a fairy tale. What we became was real. Two men who had spent too long pretending, finally daring to live in the open." Some days it still scared him. Some days it still scared me. But every morning I woke up to the sound of his guitar. Every night I fell asleep with his arm draped over me. I knew one thing for certain. We were no longer just colleagues in a newsroom. We were partners. We were a story worth writing. We were a song worth singing. And God, what a song it was. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.